This is a 15-minute look at Act 1 of Arthur Miller's The Crucible. In the course of Act 1, we meet the main protagonists. We are given background to the community and to its religious beliefs. We learn the background to the individuals, their motivations, what's driving them to do the things that they do. And we wind up with the beginning of the snowball of hysteria, which is what's going to drive the remaining 4 acts of the play. At the start of the play, we get very explicit stage directions. Remember that this is a didactic text, and what Arthur Miller is teaching us essentially is that the collective can at times strangle the individuals within it and become the thing which it is most afraid of. The symbol here is the narrowness of the window. It's a simple room with clean spareness, and it has a narrow window, so not much light gets into this room and by extension to this community. We have a lifeless child lying in the bed. Again, not a good sign, a lifeless child. We begin with one of 5 essays which Miller writes. These are not for performance. They are written to inform the reader of the play rather than the audience in the theatre. And they give us the backstory and explain a lot of the reasons that the people are acting the way they are. But it's also the vehicle that Miller uses to express his own views. His own views about what's going on with witch hunts is, of course, allegorical for what is going on with the hunt for communists in America. And in both cases, just as there are no witches, there were no communists. Well, there was no significant communist threat. In both cases, it's a bogus threat. It's been made up. And in fact, what happens is that long-held hatreds of neighbours could now be openly expressed. And the central idea is that the witch hunt is a perverse manifestation of panic, which sets in amongst all classes when the balance began to turn toward greater individual freedom. So at the point where the community begins to feel threatened by individuals who are not doing what they deem to be right, then you have a problem, and that's the problem that's being explored in this play. He says that this is a paradox in whose grip we still live. Now, Salem is a theocracy, which means there's no division between the church and the state. He describes the people who live here as being absolutely no fun. Their creed forbade anything resembling a theatre or vain enjoyment. They couldn't read a novel. They're not allowed to do anything except farm and pray. And that is exactly what they do. They are a fearful, devil-hating, persecuted community. They believe that God is going to try them. He's going to send them tests. And they believe that this witchcraft, supposed witchcraft, is a chance for them to prove their faith. At this time, the existence of witches was unquestioned. They just believe that there's a Satan and that this is something which they have to fight against, and they're militant against it. It's not something that you just do passively. You actually have to take up arms and make sure that you root Satan out of your community. So they've got this kind of zealous, ready to have a fight with Satan approach. The incident that has occurred is that a group of about 12 girls have been found by Reverend Paris, or seen by Reverend Paris, to be dancing in the forest in the dark. And, crucially, a bit of it was naked. There was a dress seen lying on the grass. We know that this happened, that the girls have done it, and we know from the girls that Abigail Adams, who is the central character, Abigail Williams, who is the central character, was the leader and the organiser of this, and that what she has done is take the slave from Barbados, Tituba, who knows how to practice voodoo, can conjure up people from the dead, can invoke the spirits, has witchcrafty powers. They've got her to go into the forest and weave spells, and the spells are intended to take the life of Elizabeth Proctor, wife of John Proctor. John is the central character, and Abigail used to work for his wife as a servant. Paris has knocked the scab off a sore when he's asked Abigail why it is that nobody wants to employ her since she was dismissed from the Proctor's household about 7 months before, and she gets very wound up and very defensive. And she blames Elizabeth Proctor, calls her a cold and snivelling, lying gossip, and omits to mention the fact that, in fact, she and John Proctor had an affair, which John has ended and is unable to endure the guilt of what he has done. That's to come. The second person that we meet, or the second set of characters that we meet, are the Putnams. These are people with a grievance. They are vengeful, they're litigious, and they've had the personal tragedy of having 7 children die in the very early part of their lives. Because of the unshakable belief in witches, they say that it must be due to them, and they believe that their daughter Ruth, who is also lying comatose, has been affected by witchcraft, and they are looking for somebody to blame for it. Paris is getting beside himself because he doesn't believe it's witchcraft, but he does know that something wrong has been going on and that Abigail is at the centre of it, and he does know that he has enemies and that these people are out to get him. So when Paris leaves the room, Abigail jumps in and takes the opportunity to tell the other girls in the room, Mercy, Mary Warren, and comatose Betty, who can no doubt hear it, judging by what she does. Abigail tells them what they can say. She says he knows Tituba conjured Ruth's sisters, that's the dead children. He saw Mercy naked, and Mary Warren gives the awful news that they're talking about witchcraft and that that's a hanging offence and we have to take the truth. She says, Abby, you'll only be whipped for dancing. And Abigail corrects her and says, we'll be whipped. Abigail's not taking the blame, no way. Betty accuses her and says, you drank blood, Abby. You didn't tell him that. And Abigail says, Betty, you never say that again. You will never. And Betty says, you did. You drank a charm to kill John Proctor's wife. You drank a charm to kill Goody Proctor. And Abigail smashes her across the face. Shut it. Now shut it. So we've got a pretty good character portrait of Abigail right away at the beginning there. Proctor then comes in. And he's our central character, and we see him as a man of great physical presence, a man who has a sharp and biting way with hypocrites, powerful of body, even-tempered, not easily led, but he's a sinner. And this is at the heart of John Proctor's character. His tragic flaw is that he has a guilty conscience. He is a sinner not only against the moral fashion of the time, but, and this is worse, against his own vision of what decent conduct is. People respected and even feared him, but he has come to regard himself as a kind of fraud. So guilt has worked into his soul and has blistered it so that he is unable to forgive himself for what he did. Abigail gets him alone and says, give me a soft word, John. And this triggers a firm dismissal of Abigail by John. He says, you know, I'm not coming for you again. And she reminds him of the how he sweated like a stallion whenever she came near. She's a very frank young woman. And you loved me then and you love me now. That's denying what he says. She insists, I have a sense for heat, John, and I've seen you looking up and burning in your loneliness. And Proctor agrees that he does look at her. And then he puts her away from him, and it says gently pressing her from him with great sympathy but firmly. So it's clear that he is not being unkind or unpleasant now, but that he wants to stop what went on between them. He says, I will cut off my hand before I ever reach for you. Wipe it out of mind. We never touched, Abby. And he means that in the spiritual sense. And she says, but we did. And she just won't take no for an answer. But then Abigail starts criticising Elizabeth, and Proctor gets very angry with her. So we can see that Abigail has set herself aside. And finally, in this desperate and really quite tragic outcry, she says, pity me, and he won't. The next group of people we meet are Rebecca Nurse and her husband Francis. These are the fair and wise old couple who speak the truth and give advice which other people overlook. And then our next character is Reverend Hale. And Reverend Hale comes as the hope of the side. He's the person that's going to solve everything that's happened. He's got books, and it's pretty significant that the first prop that we meet in the story is a bunch of books. Like the others, Reverend Hale conceives the devil as a necessary part of a respectable view of cosmology, and he believes that his books contain the learning necessary for him to get rid of them. There's a whole lot of details of the types of devils that are in the book included in this rather long essay. If we skip quickly through the rest of the act, we meet also old Giles, who turns out to be a remarkable character. He begins as a thorn in the side, but he turns out to be an extraordinarily committed man who will give nothing and sees himself killed in a way that preserves his estate for his offspring. Hale says very confidently that his books contain all the invisible world, caught, defined, and calculated. So I think we can recognise that this is pride being set up for a fall. And indeed, Hale is the only person in the whole play who undergoes a character transformation where he realises that his initial position and his beliefs were not founded on anything reasonable. Toward the close of the act, we see Tituba being coerced by Hale into confessing that she has trucked with the devil. And once she starts doing this, she basically pulls the plug. And what happens is that she sets in train an inevitable chain of events. It begins with her saying what she's done. But in the midst of it all, Abigail rises, note the stage direction, because she rises literally and figuratively, staring as though inspired, and cries out, "I want to open myself." So Abigail is saying, I've got something to tell. I want the light of God. I want the sweet love of Jesus. I danced for the devil. I saw him. I wrote in his book. She too confesses. I go back to Jesus. I kiss his hand. She's got great flair for drama. And then she starts naming names. And this is critical to what's happening in the McCarthy era in America and also to what goes on in the play here. I saw Sarah Good with the devil. I saw Goody Osborne. I saw Bridget Bishop. And one by one, the other girls pick up this chorus, and it's about sight. It's what they saw. The idea that they saw these things. This witchcraft is a crime for which there is no evidence. There are no witnesses. Nobody but the person who claims they saw the devil has any idea whether they saw the devil or not. Oh, wait a minute, there are no devils. They can't have seen the devil. We know as a 21st century audience that they're making it up. But this idea that they say they've seen it, and it gains momentum, the hysteria begins, and within several lines it's snowballed so that absolutely everybody is crying out ecstatically when the curtain falls.